Tonight, a journey through the ruthless world of the dog trade.
If they walk and if they've got a pulse, they'll fetch a price.
From the small-time illegal sellers.
There she is there.
Hello, darling.
Are the dogs owned by you?
No comment.
To the country's dog traffickers.
People need to come and say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
To the breeders.
You're the hard man! Right, get out! I'm going to take me on!
Confronting those at the heart of it. Exposing the profit-driven puppy farmers.
Everywhere you can see there's just dogs everywhere.
Get out! Get out!
Tonight we investigate the dog factory. Falkirk. It's early morning and the man in the window is waiting to buy a dog.
You got us?
He told me to give you this. It's got its first vaccination.
The man in the green is no ordinary customer. He's an undercover investigator with the Scottish SPCA. His target, Justin Finn, a dog trader from Northern Ireland who has a history of selling sick and dying dogs in Scotland. The investigator and his colleague reveal their identities to Finn and say they want to check the welfare of any dogs he's selling.
Have you got any other dogs in the van?
No.
How many?
But when the van is opened up, investigators find inside 11 puppies of different breeds.
Why do you have them?
No comment.
Are the dogs owned by you?
No comment.
Where have you travelled from?
The SSPCA log every dog in case of a criminal prosecution and then seize them. These dogs, confused and stressed, have travelled for hours from Northern Ireland. They'll now be taken to a vet and checked. Selling puppies from the back of a van might seem harmless enough, but Justin Finn is part of a trade which today is Britain's biggest story of animal cruelty. Let's face it, we love dogs. There are more than 9 million of them in the UK, and the puppy business alone is worth hundreds of millions every year. For the last 6 months, I've been investigating those involved in the dog trade, from the legitimate to the downright criminal, from small-time sellers to profit-driven puppy farmers. And at the heart of it all, unbelievable cruelty to an animal that we used to consider man's best friend. Today I'm on my way to meet 2 dog lovers who've experienced the dark side of the puppy trade. Lorraine and Michaela both bought puppies online.
We decided to get a puppy and we went on Gumtree, Pets for Homes, those kinds of websites to try and find one. We came across a lovely wee jug, a Jack Russell Pug Cross. Says to my husband, we need to get that dog.
I wanted a pup. Started looking at the internet, seen Maisie, and I said I want that pup.
Although they didn't realise it, both women were buying pups from the same seller. The puppy that caught Michaela's eye was on sale for £395. The woman selling the dog kindly offered to meet them at an Ayrshire car park to make the sale.
Excitement got the better of us. At that point, we never thought anything wrong with it because we'd never bought a puppy before.
The woman was just as accommodating with Lorraine.
She texted me back and said that she would do us a favour and bring the pup up because she was going to Glasgow with the other pup.
Michaela named her puppy Bane. All seemed well until day 3.
He was just lying and he wasn't moving at all, but he was still breathing, and he let out a kind of scream. It was the worst sound I've ever heard in my life. I just died. Sorry.
Like Michaela's dog, Lorraine's pup, Maisie, also became seriously ill after just a few days. She had the deadly parvovirus, a disease spread easily through contact with infected faeces, often seen in dogs bred in poor conditions. Maisie survived, but only after an emergency operation. I go online and see the woman is still advertising pups. Oddly, she seems to be calling herself different names. Our team give her a call.
Hello. Oh, hello. Is that Anne? Yes. Hello, Anne. I'm calling about your advert for the palm cheese. All right, sure. Hello. Oh, hi there. Is that Linda? Yeah, speaking. Hello. Hi there. Is that Marie? Yes, speaking. Hi there. I'm on the ClickPets website at the moment.
It's the same woman every time. And that woman, we've discovered, is actually called Liz Baird. She's a notorious dealer in the puppy industry. Her trademark, backstreet sales of sick and dying dogs, sold for cash, no questions asked. She's been investigated, prosecuted, even banned. But as we're about to find out, this hasn't stopped her. It's a cold December evening. I've made an appointment to see one of Baird's dogs. This time, she's calling herself Anne.
There she is there.
She suggested the quietest part of the car park to make the deal.
Hello, darling.
That's her there.
Hello.
I'll just wrap her up so she's free.
Oh, hold on. Yes, she will be cold. Oh, hello.
Now, there's all her...
Well, hold on. I don't know if I'm taking her just yet. I just want to have...
Right.
Okay, just...
The Kennel Club says breeders should do everything to ensure their pups are going to good homes. Yet just 45 seconds into our meeting and Baird wants the sale done. But I'm not quite ready to make the deal.
How old is she?
She'll be 9 weeks on Saturday.
What do I need to get done, injection-wise?
Well, she's been one last week. She was done with Paraveda last week. Which
What's that?
done them at 6 weeks and 8 weeks.
Okay.
It's an organic. Check it out online.
Hello.
It's for Paravade. Hello. And it's for Parvo and it's for Lintus. That's the two main ones.
Okay.
Defleed as well last week. So
Okay.
Been done.
Parvo is deadly. It can kill within hours. Any responsible breeder would vaccinate. Baird has chosen a herbal remedy, which veterinary experts say is no alternative to proper vaccination.
So do I need to get anything for her?
If you want to go down the technical, like the vet route, you can, but she's covered.
Not according to the British Veterinary Association.
Can I see whatever paperwork I would get? Or
well, there is no paperwork.
Oh, there'll be nothing.
You don't get paperwork with.
The Kennel Club says it's just as important that prospective buyers do their research before taking on a puppy. But it's not long before my questions begin to annoy her.
Do you need hips or anything done?
Buy the dog.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm standing here freezing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I think she's beautiful. She's tiny. She's utterly
With that, Baird ends the meeting and, true to form, gives me a false name.
And you are?
My name's Anne.
Anne, right, okay. Bye-bye. Everything about that meeting was wrong. The location, there's no paperwork, there's no vet certificate, her complete lack of interest in my suitability and her annoyance that you could see at even the most basic questions that I was asking. But I can totally get why people hand over their money to that woman because it's an emotional purchase, because I would rather I had that dog than she had it.
What you're about to see, some people may find upsetting. Nearly a fifth of all dogs bought on the internet will die within 6 months. This dead pup, lovingly boxed with a cuddly toy, was bought from a notorious breeder who sells online. The post-mortem revealed parvovirus. Poor conditions and a lack of veterinary care provide the perfect breeding ground for this deadly disease. The SSPCA see it often in dogs advertised online by sellers.
They don't want to take the dogs to the vet because it eats into their profit. The least amount of money they can put into the dogs and the most they can get out of them is what their intentions are.
The man I'm speaking with works undercover, investigating the illegal dog trade between Northern Ireland and Scotland. His job, to target those making a killing on the back of this ruthless industry.
How much money can you make?
Pups are sold wholesale for somewhere in the region of £150. The more dogs you buy, the cheaper you get them. You bring them across to Scotland and you sell them from £300 to £750, depending on the breed you want. If you go for the more specialist breeds, for instance, French Bulldogs, it can be £1,500. It's all cash. So the person who goes across and buys wholesale pays cash, brings them across to Scotland. The people that buy from them buy cash. So what you've got is you've got huge volumes of cash circulating through Ireland, Scotland and England that's completely unaccountable.
It's quite simple. The more dogs you breed, the less your costs. The more corners you can cut, the greater your profit. And that can mean one thing: puppy farming.
The ideal puppy purchase is this. A registered breeder would have a litter of pups, would go to their home, would be shown vaccination certificates, you'd be able to see the pup's mum, and the breeder would ensure that we, the customer, were a suitable owner. Only once everyone is satisfied would the sale go ahead and the puppy taken to its loving new home. Puppy farming is often quite different, with multiple litters of multiple breeds of multiple ages, all kept under one roof for the puppy farmer to sell. There's no paperwork. We can't see the mum or the conditions in which they're kept. And when things go wrong, the seller has often disappeared, no doubt to count his cash. Some puppy farms are licensed. They adhere to tight animal welfare legislation and are therefore legal. But all too often, this isn't the case. The problem is that in the pursuit of profit, animal welfare isn't a priority for all puppy farmers, as you're about to see. The following images can be the reality of the trade. You may find some of them disturbing. Footage of various puppy farms in Wales. 1 in every 3 pups bought in the UK today will have come from a puppy farm. The carcass of a calf lies in the middle of one shed. Last year, puppy farms in Wales received several £1 million in European farming subsidies. These photos are of an unlicensed puppy farm in Scotland. This breeding bitch had also been used for dogfighting. The poor breeding and disastrous infection control take its toll on many. Thousands end up sick or dead. Those which survive often suffer behavioural issues born out of a lack of human contact or exposure to normal life. Legislation exists to protect the welfare of dogs like these. Unfortunately, to the profit-driven puppy farmer, these legal directives are often seen as merely a costly inconvenience. Investigating the illegal side of the dog trade can take you to some unexpected places. This is the affluent West End of Hamilton. Now, many of the houses round about here worth, what, £500,000 or so. One of the most expensive ones in this particular street is that one, just over there. It's home to Bernadette and Brian O'Neill. They've lived here nearly 8 years, paying more than £500,000 for the property back in 2007. Bernadette's from the Republic of Ireland, Brian's from Glasgow. With the tricolour flying proudly in the back garden, their love of Ireland is clear for all to see. But they also have another great love. Dogs. Bernadette sells dogs, lots of dogs. These are all adverts taken out by her and her husband in just a few months. Dozens of adverts, dozens of dogs. The O'Neills use different names which disguise the scale of their operation.
Hello. Hi there, is that Russell? Yes. I'm just calling about your advert on Gumtree with the Pomeranian puppies. Hello. Oh, hello there. Can I speak to Henry, please? Yes. Hello. Oh, hi. Can I speak to Seamus, please?
The man who answers each and every time is Brian O'Neill. He's selling multiple breeds and multiple litters, week in, week out. I want to find out where the pups are coming from. We make an appointment to see a couple of the advertised dogs. As we arrive, a pair of happy buyers leave with their new puppy.
Hi, I'm here to see Russell about the dogs.
Yes, come on in, what's your name?
Is it Mandy?
Mandy, come in.
This is Bernadette O'Neill.
So cute.
She brings out the first of the two dogs we've come to see.
They've had they're fully bed checked.
Yeah.
They've been worn down, fleed up to date.
Right.
And they're ready to go.
Russell, real name Brian O'Neill, pops in to say hello. Bernadette tells us the dogs they're selling have come from a breeder.
They're in Muscovy.
Surprisingly, she's reluctant to tell us the breeder's details.
We never give out breeders.
Oh, you don't do that?
No, no.
That one, gorgeous.
We saw two pups during that visit. Another had just been picked up. And we know from their adverts that they have a whole lot more. For the O'Neills to be selling that many dogs that many times means there's a ready supply from somewhere. Now, they've just told us they buy from a breeder in West Kilbride. Well, I've looked at all the breeders in the country with licences, and there aren't any in West Kilbride. So, where are the dogs coming from? Why would they lie about the source? I managed to track down a couple of customers of the O'Neills. Both say they were impressed by the affluent address.
It's like where footballers would stay because of the house.
And that made you think what?
That we were going to a person that breeds the dogs properly and nothing in the background.
Best start, the best start that you could possibly have for your dog.
But that soon changed when Tracy went to collect her new pup, Winston.
He was filthy. He had an ear infection, so we had to get the antibiotics for that. And for the first week, he was so quiet. You wouldn't even think we had a dog in the house.
Tracy's description of Winston, his health problems, his behaviour, his lack of socialisation, his lack of paperwork, fits perfectly with that of a farmed pup. Lisa's dog Rosie, her behaviour, her health was the same. But it was when Bernadette handed the puppy to her and said it was from Ireland that alarm bells began to ring.
She said, my husband's got a company, he's got a licence on his van to bring dogs over. And I was like, OK. I kind of assumed that it was Northern Ireland, didn't really think there'd be a problem with it.
So you take the dog and you suddenly get given the documentation and you look at it and you realise it's the south of Ireland.
It's the south of Ireland, it's County Wexford. That's not part of the UK, therefore something is completely illegal and wrong.
Rosie should have had a pet passport, been rabies vaccinated and microchipped. She had none of these. The O'Neills had blatantly ignored the legislation set up to protect dogs from being transported into the country at a young age, as well as defend the UK from rabies. Lisa's vet contacted the authorities, who presented a difficult choice.
The options I were given were to put her to sleep, have her deported back to Ireland somewhere, or to have her quarantined.
Lisa chose quarantine, effectively doubling the cost of Rosie. With the O'Neills having already smuggled one pup into the country, I wondered how many more they'd illegally trafficked.
Ruth. Sam from the BBC, nice to meet you. How are you doing?
Ruth Elliott is a vet local to the Hamilton area. Turns out the O'Neills are no stranger to her.
You were getting the same story from the owners about where they came. It was just a breeder in Hamilton. It was a big house, lovely big house. The pups were all the same breeds. They were tended to be in the same condition. You would see litter mates coming in for vaccination, often had the same paperwork, the same vaccination cards. And yeah, it pointed to the fact that they were all coming from the same place, from the one breeder in Hamilton, the O'Neills.
And how many dogs do you think you've seen that you believe came from them?
I would think it must be in the hundreds.
Really?
They tended not always to be as well grown as we would expect for their age. They hadn't necessarily been particularly well socialised. All the clues together points directly to the fact that these pups are coming from puppy farms.
And it turns out that Lisa's illegal import wasn't a one-off. Ruth Elliott discovered that some of her clients who'd also bought from the O'Neills had been given similar Irish paperwork.
We then asked, rightly so, if the pups had their rabies vaccination and pet passport. The owners were completely unaware, that the pups had been illegally moved into the UK.
If what I'm hearing is true, then the O'Neills have been trafficking hundreds of dogs into the UK from Ireland. Proving it, though, is going to be difficult. Yet a little more digging, and it seems the paper trail does show a link. I found a company specialising in selling Irish dogs. I recognise the details. It's the O'Neills. It's time to find out exactly where the pups are coming from. I spend the next few months keeping a very close eye on the movements of Brian O'Neill. Almost every Tuesday I watch as he travels to Cairn Ryan to catch the early ferry to Belfast. But it's where he goes next which confirms my suspicions.
Now, this is one of the main roads down into the Republic of Ireland. I'm currently in the north. That sign down there on the left indicates that you're entering the south. And hopefully, in a few moments, we should be seeing Brian O'Neill taking this very journey.
And bang on time, there he is. Straight across the border into the Republic of Ireland. And it's here he does his shopping, collecting puppies from various suppliers. No proof of vaccination, too young to travel, and often sick. It's clear to see why buyers come to the south for their stock. Pedigree pups here can be sold for as little as £36, a fraction of the cost in the UK. The following morning, van full, he drives back to the north and heads straight for the docks. Week in, week out. The odd spot check at the port doesn't deter him, refusing on one occasion to tell officers where he gets the dogs from.
Yep, that's him on the move.
After the dogs are safely on Scottish soil, the next part of the O'Neill's deception begins. He arrives at a porter cabin in rural Ayrshire. What he's dropping into the crates are the pups. He takes them into a porter cabin where a vet is waiting. As far as I can tell, the vet then checks them in good faith and vaccinates. The certificate issued makes no mention of Ireland, or pet passports, or rabies vaccines. An illegal past now almost impossible to trace. It's time for me to see for myself the dogs I've witnessed being illegally imported into the country.
I'm just going to give Brian O'Neill a call. He's calling himself Russell on his adverts.
Hello.
Oh, hi, is Russell there, please?
Sorry?
Hi, is Russell there, please?
Who, sorry?
He can't even remember who he's supposed to be.
Russell?
Yes, speaking.
All right, sorry. I was just phoning up. I'd seen an advert for some Jack Russell miniature dogs.
Yeah.
I was just phoning up to see whether, in the vain hope, well, the desperate hope really, that you've got some left.
I have, yes.
Excellent.
I arrive for my appointment to buy a dog. It's not long before Bernadette tells me the 8-week-old pups were bought the week earlier from West Kilbride. She then talks me through the vaccination card issued the previous morning in the porter cabin.
So the date of birth is the 16th of the 10th.
To all intents and purposes, I'm buying a Scottish dog.
If you ever have any questions or any problems with the dog, you come up to us. Not to the breeder. Not to the breeder. That's fine. You deal with us. We've never had a problem, really, because we know where they're coming from, we know they're healthy. I have people now calling up and say, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have just, I can't believe how good the wee puppies are, and I love to get that kind of feedback. You know, and what? Are you a nice scratch? Are you?
What will the SSPCA undercover officer make of the O'Neills' smuggling operation?
Where would the O'Neills sit in terms of scale for you?
Yeah.
Problems for you?
Well, we would believe them to be significant dealers in pups
Close
in
to the
Scotland.
top?
Yeah, I would say that they would. They certainly. We believe are generating large amounts of money and bringing in large amounts of dogs. So yeah, definitely.
I've done the sums. I believe they're selling around 50 dogs every month. And that's a conservative estimate. Well, that's around £200,000 a year, cash. I want to know the consequences in terms of animal welfare of what the O'Neills are doing. Watching my footage are 3 of the UK's most eminent experts in veterinary medicine, animal welfare law and canine behaviour.
John, you're wincing a little bit at that.
Puppy's frozen because it's not used to being picked up, put on carpet. It's probably never been on carpet in its life by the looks of it. It's not coping at all well at the moment.
It doesn't look a healthy puppy either. That puppy does look thin and pot-bellied.
The dog's welfare is clearly compromised.
And I think it's worth making the point too that some of these puppies will turn to aggression as a way of dealing with their mental health issues. The truth of it is that most of the aggressive dogs we see in the country have come through this kind of route.
The despicable nature of this trade is that absolutely everybody involved in it is a loser, apart from the people who are making very significant amounts of money.
It's time for me to ask Brian O'Neill about his activities. I catch up with him at the border as he heads south on another dog run.
Hi, Mr. O'Neill. I'm Sam Poling from the BBC. I just wanted to have a chat with you privately about your illegal dog trafficking operation, if that's okay. Well, what I'd like to do is just ask about all the dogs that you've been bringing, backwards and forwards, week in, week out, month in, month out. I've been following you for the past 4 months. And I know that you've been literally taking hundreds of dogs week in and week out, Mr. O'Neill, and having the history of those dogs rewritten as Scottish. You've got absolutely nothing to say about it. That's Brian O'Neill, has got absolutely nothing to say for himself. So my advice, if you're looking to buy a dog, is do not buy a dog off that man.
As the O'Neills have shown, those involved in the illegal dog industry find deception a helpful tool. Last year, more than half of all those who bought a puppy had to rely on the seller's assurances as to the animal's true background, instead of seeing where the pup had been bred. There's a reason for that. The seller is often just the shop front, his stock bought from elsewhere. The warehouse. That's where I want to go. And it's here in Ireland. Its rural farmlands, its remoteness, supported a complex criminal infrastructure during the Troubles. It now provides the perfect breeding ground for puppy farms. Busy shipping ports along its coast enable the dogs to be moved easily and quickly to market. Down at Belfast Dock, I meet a man who spent the last 5 years working for enforcement agencies investigating cases of animal cruelty. A former police officer, he now works undercover and says the criminal networks he exposed in drug gangs and weapons trafficking have similarities to what he's discovered in the illegal dog trade.
It's a fantastic distribution network. It'll be similar to what you'd look upon with sort of drugs being brought into the country, as in the pure cocaine. Pups in this case here are another commodity to make money, and it's always a cash transaction. There's no accountability for it. These people do not accept checks. They don't accept credit cards or debit cards. They just look for cash, and it's cash, you don't get the pup.
This is a business. It's just the commodity as dog.
Yeah, no, it is a business, and it's a very effective business. It's a business, unfortunately, which there's no accountability for.
He describes to me a network of sellers who travel through Belfast port unchallenged every day, smuggling up to 20 pups at a time.
If they're selling them from between £200 and £400 a dog or a pup, that's an awful lot of money.
Just for the one trip?
For one trip, and they generally do that on a 24-hour basis.
Really?
So that's out and back in the next day.
It's 9 o'clock at night in the border area of Northern Ireland. 2 SSPCA investigators have travelled from Scotland to find the breeders behind the dogs seized in Falkirk. Remember, they were the ones being sold by Justin Finn from a van in a housing estate.
Where have you travelled from? No comment.
Turns out 9 of the 11 dogs were sick, with a parasite the investigators believe point to one thing: a puppy farm with poor animal welfare.
Oh, this looks an interesting kind of place.
They're looking for Edmund Finn, a relation of Justin.
Watch yourself.
There you go.
Yeah, this is the place. Hello? Mr. Finn? Hello? Mr. Finn?
There's no sign of Finn. Inside an unlocked shed are numerous pups.
Hello? Is anybody here?
It's dark and filthy.
Hello? The SSPCA.
In the empty, dilapidated farmhouse, the investigator finds more pups, even younger than those in the sheds. It's a puppy farm, and the SSPCA are deeply concerned about the dogs' welfare.
Come back tomorrow.
The following morning, they return. Finn is there.
Mr. Finn, I'm here principally about them dogs. Yeah. And I want to try and get to the bottom of what we're going to do with the dogs.
Finn admits he was the owner of some of the seized dogs.
I would really appreciate if you would help me to reassure me that everything's all right. And if you do that, I'll appreciate that.
I don't care what you appreciate or what you don't. I am licensed. My
Of
man
course.
comes out, checks me out. Matter of fact, he can come anytime.
Yes.
The dog warden is welcome here anytime.
Despite the conditions witnessed the night before, Finn claims he's a licensed breeder. The investigators ask Finn to demonstrate his system of infection control. He refuses.
I'm concerned that those pups were bred in conditions that compromised their welfare. In other words, they were bred in circumstances that's no good for the dogs.
Well, that's your opinion.
Yes.
But my opinion, no, you're wrong.
But when asked to provide his licence, it's discovered it's months out of date. He decides he's had enough of the camera.
Hey! Quit it. I may be an old man, but you'll see what I'll do with you.
Come on now, hey, behave yourself.
No, but don't think I'm stupid. Well, you bad. Hey!
Easy now.
You want trouble, do you? You want trouble? Are you the hard man?
No.
Are you the hard? Right, get out. I'm taking that shit. No hard man,
Listen.
come here.
Listen.
No hard man takes me on.
Edwin.
No. Look, you get out. Get out.
With Finn refusing them access, the officers have no option but to leave and report their concerns about the conditions of the dogs.
Get out.
I show the panel our footage of the Finn's dogs and the conditions we'd found them in.
I mean, that litter of puppies look absolutely terrified. I would guess that they've probably almost never seen a human being before. They know how to be dogs, but they haven't a clue how to react to people. They just see us as scary. And this is an animal which is going to go and live in somebody's home in a couple of weeks' time, and it still hasn't learned what a human being is.
A well-adjusted puppy is naturally inquisitive, isn't it?
But the only world they know is that floor and those concrete walls.
Mr. Finn told us in a statement that his dogs are all vet-checked, vaccinated, microchipped and wormed. His premises have been inspected by the council and his puppies, he said, are talked to, handled and played with every day to ensure that their mental well-being is kept intact. He said his out-of-date licence was the fault of the council. We asked the council, who said the delay in issuing the licence was down to Mr. Finn having paid the wrong fee. No stranger to the Finns is this man, Stephen Philpott, the chief executive of the USPCA and thorn in the side of many a puppy farmer.
Edwin Finn is certainly an operator in the puppy market. He's not Champions League standard, but he's certainly a Premiership player. He certainly produces an awful lot of dogs, and he certainly has a network in place to distribute those dogs.
Philpott is all too aware that his patch is the breeding ground for much of the puppy farm trade, which is flooding Scotland and elsewhere. Some of the breeders now operating their dwarf places like Finn's.
There are three main layers in the puppy farm industry. Most people in the street only ever get to see the end layer. The end layer is the retailer, the person who sells the dog. You then have the grower, you have the person who brings the dog on from a very early stage of its life, possibly 4, 5, 6 weeks, brings it on until it's able to be moved to the retailer to be sold. But then you have the manufacturer, you have the person who runs the factory, the person who runs the puppy farm, and they produce the animals on a large scale and move them out through their networks.
Philpott feels legislation hasn't kept up with how dogs are being bred on puppy farms. You use the word farm, but these are dogs.
The reason we use the word farm is because the animals are quite literally kept on an agricultural scale. In Northern Ireland we have legislation which, 2 years ago which was divided up to separate agricultural animals from companion animals. Unfortunately, the legislation that we need to deal with this has to deal with the animals on an agricultural scale, because that's how they're being produced, that's how they're being kept, it's how they're being fed. They're being farmed, that's the word.
Up until now, everything you've seen is what those who monitor the industry, that's animal welfare experts, campaign groups and charities, know about. So, cruelty, a distribution network and profit. But what I was about to discover, many people didn't think existed in the UK. They were wrong.
We're talking scale. Just how big are the UK's largest puppy farms? My journey to the answer begins in Northern Ireland's Stormont Parliament. In 2010, the country's Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, known as DARD, decided updated legislation was necessary to regulate commercial dog breeding. It was pretty standard, yet not everyone was happy about it. A group of dog breeders called Canine Breeders Ireland objected to nearly every aspect of the legislation. They didn't want an annual licence, they wanted a 5-year one. Imposing limits on the number of dogs they could keep, they said, was disgusting. Dogs didn't need daily exercise, they could do that themselves in the kennels. A maximum of 6 litters per bitch was too low, they said. They want 10. A cleaning schedule was over-regulation. Drinking water didn't need to be changed daily, and they could see nothing wrong with dogs eating food off the floor, as long as it was clean. Representing the Canine Breeders Ireland are these men. David Hamilton in the centre, his brother Jonathan on the right, and fellow dog breeder Jerry Smith.
May I thank the committee for inviting the representatives of Canine Breeders Ireland to come along and testify today.
Here they are giving evidence instalment for the Welfare of Animals Bill.
The term puppy farmer, we've said this before, it's a derogatory term. Cruelty to animals is a crime, and we are licensed breeders and we represent licensed breeders, and we think it's an overhyped issue.
In Northern Ireland alone, the dog breeding industry is worth £160 million.
Do you see any difference between breeding of dogs, breeding of cattle, sheep or anything else?
Well, they're living animals and they're bred for profit, whether people like that or not. The distinction is no.
The Hamilton brothers own this place. Furnish Kennels in 5 Mile Town. It claims to be the largest licensed dog breeding establishment in the UK. Although it operates on a profit basis, they state animal welfare is their priority. I managed to find a document which shows that in 2012, between them, the brothers were licensed to keep a lot of dogs there, all 534 of them. Surely that many dogs on one site would make adhering to animal welfare legislation more of a challenge. The USPCA told me that over the years they'd had numerous reports of sick dogs being sold which had come from Furnish Kennels. It's closed to the public, so the only way I'm going to find out what's happening there is to speak with someone on the inside. David Bailey was a government vet working for the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. At the same time, he was employed on the side by the Hamiltons for almost 3 years from 2007. He's never spoken publicly about the Hamilton brothers and their dog breeding operation. Until now.
This was a production scale enterprise that was driven by profit. There was about 500 breeding bitches, they had a few stud dogs, but they had maybe 80 or 90 puppies, newborn puppies of various stages of sort of development up until 6 to 7 to 8 weeks. So let's call it 600 animals. I'd never seen it before with regard to a breeding population of dogs, never seen it before.
Bailey wanted a log kept of all the dogs, but said that David Hamilton was reluctant to keep these records.
I have my suspicions why he didn't want me or others to know the numbers of animals that he had.
The suspicions being what?
So the suspicion being that he didn't want it publicised or made clear to anyone for any reason that maybe a bitch was being bred from 3 or 4 times a year. That the number of deaths that puppies would die was unacceptably high.
Sick and diseased puppies were a constant concern, as these emails from David Hamilton to Bailey show. For the Hamilton brothers, every dead dog or bitch unable to produce is a loss of revenue. Agricultural-style farming began to be applied.
It was like a production facility that you'd expect in I guess, a bad pig raising facility. Every animal in the premises was given an antibiotic injection every week, and then we would change the antibiotic every month, just like you do, because we could not control the infections. At one stage I asked them what they were doing about external parasite control. They were reluctant to tell me, but eventually, from memory, they were using a substance, it's for pigs really, to control mange in pigs. It's quite heavy duty stuff, and they just had a big bucket of it, and every dog got a dunking once a week. And that was their external parasite control. I suggested that other methods were available, and they thanked me for my suggestion.
With infection getting out of control, the Hamiltons decided to address the problem themselves.
Did they ever ask you for drugs to euthanize dogs?
Yes, they asked for the drugs, they didn't get them.
And then the next, you get an email from David Hamilton where he's concerned because he's applied for a firearm and he's concerned he might not get it.
Yes, he's asked me to support his application for a firearm for the purpose of putting down puppies or dogs. I did not support that application.
Not only did Bailey refuse, so too did the police. Incredibly, David Hamilton had stated on his firearms application that he wanted the gun to shoot dogs. Responding, the licensing officer tells him that a handgun isn't a slaughtering instrument and it's also illegal to shoot dogs. Not long after this, Bailey decided he'd had enough. The relationship between him and the Hamiltons had broken down. He was, he says, always in it for the welfare of the animals. They, he said, were in it solely for the cash.
My obligation is not to the Hamiltons, it's to the animals. Okay. So, and I have a duty. I have a duty to report what I feel are breaches in animal welfare. They may not like it, but I have a duty to the animals, not to them.
The experience of the USPCA, the evidence given to me by David Bailey, all suggests serious breaches in animal welfare at Furnish Kennels. But it's the scale of the operation that I'm interested in.
Everything I've heard points to Furnish Kennels operating like a factory, a dog factory. I want to capture it on camera. With the kennels closed to outside guests, I'm going to have to choose the timing of my visit there very carefully.
Drop off at the 5-bar gate, into the field. Once the whole ground party's in the field.
It's 2 in the morning on the outskirts of 5 Mile Town, not far from the border in Northern Ireland.
In the event of anything happening, basically, we come back down to this gate, and that's where our drop-off and pick-up gate is. If we have to go...
The men I'm with are undercover investigators.
These main sheds here, we believe, is where the actual puppies are bred. That's the main puppy farm. Our biggest problem is that's where the actual occupants of the whole yard actually live.
This is big business for these guys. They come out and find, you know, a few of us in their yard.
They're not going to be happy.
No.
So we're there to turn around and try and get you the evidence we need. But at the same time, we're not going to compromise ourselves.
We travelled a few short miles to the farm. It's so dark, the only way to film is by switching the camera to night vision. In the distance, I hear the faint sound of dogs coming from the Hamiltons complex.
This is what we believe to be the heart of the operation. Just up this field, in several parts, is what we understand to be a large number of dogs. If we're talking about puppy farming, then this is it.
We arrive at the farm.
Gordon as well, anyway.
The noise is deafening. hundreds of dogs, row upon row of cages. Every single one of these animals a breeding bitch for the Hamilton's dog factory. The scale is unimaginable. Oil cubes like these, when empty, are put in the back of each run for the dogs to sleep in. Something catches my eye in each of the cages. Plastic pipes with a hollow trough at the bottom. It's an automatic feeding system. The pipes are filled with food which drops down whenever the trough becomes empty. It's similar to ones used in battery farming. It's a labour-saving device and reduces the need for human contact. One thing is puzzling me though. If this is a puppy farm, where are the pups? Across the yard from the mums, I find a row of what look like old, disused trailers. It's freezing and there's snow on the ground, yet inside I can hear whimpering. You can hear the dogs now.
Yeah, there's pups in there, for definite.
Inside, I find the pups. Just weeks old, huddled together. No mums, just pups. Dozens of them.
Multiple breeds, multiple litters, multiple ages. So this is puppy farming.
In another trailer, more puppies.
These are all empty, presumably waiting for the next batch of dogs to be filling them. This is, in the authorities' eyes, a perfectly legitimate, licensed dog breeding operation. It just happens to look like a farm, a dog farm, a dog factory.
I struggle to see how the legislation allows a place like this, but I'm no expert. I show my footage to our panel.
All that noise going on, those dogs are going to be deafened because dogs have very sensitive hearing.
Yeah. And I presume the feeding system is there, so it just reduces the contact with humans even more, really. I mean, these dogs are not going to be well socialised dogs. They're not going to look on humans as being their source of food. It's just going to come out of a tube.
It seems to me, just looking at it, that this is a lower standard than would be required of agricultural animals in an intensive system.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Are you shocked by this, genuinely?
Very, very genuine.
Yeah.
Shocked, yes.
I've never seen anything like this anywhere. It's an extraordinary and abhorrent mixture of the worst of factory farming and dog breeding.
So this place is licensed?
Yeah.
It calls into question the whole credibility and integrity of the legislative regime.
In a statement through his solicitor, David Hamilton said his premises are maintained and run in accordance with all relevant legislation and regulations in an entirely open and transparent manner. All dogs are under the supervision of a nominated veterinary surgeon. All recognised protocols are in place. We contacted the council responsible for the inspections of Furnish Kennels. They told us the kennels was now called the UK Dog Breeding Academy. They inspected the premises 4 weeks ago and found no evidence or mortality. No puppies were found to be kept in trailers on site. It was their opinion that the premises are kept in very good condition and complied with legislation. I want to know what those who helped create the legislation in Scotland think of all we've uncovered during the course of our investigation.
Scottish Government takes animal welfare very seriously. We have in place various bits of legislation that helps with this, around licensing of breeding establishments and the conditions that are applied to them, pet shop licensing, but all of that relies on knowing about people who are avoiding them and enforcement of the legislation. So whilst we can create legislation, it's just as important that that legislation is enforced.
I tell her about the O'Neills and their business of trafficking young pups.
They should be 15 weeks if they've come from the public. They should be rabies vaccinated.
Yes.
They should be microchipped. There should be pet passports. Yes. That's all true, isn't it? They should have
all
of that.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
They have none of that. These guys are illegally importing these dogs.
Yes. Supply us with details and it'll be followed up.
And what about the conditions at Furnish Kennels in Northern Ireland, run by the Hamiltons? Pups which are ending up in Scotland.
It was barbaric. It was a production line. It was using animals as a commodity.
Battery farming?
Yes.
That upset you?
Yes. I'm not easily upset, but yes, that upset me.
If there's one thing I've learnt from all of this, it's that we, the buying public, have as much a responsibility as those breeders and those sellers. In that if we bought with our heads rather than our hearts, then perhaps the trade wouldn't be as profitable as it is for those not just abusing the system, but abusing those at the centre of it all, and that's the dogs.
Puppy seller Liz Baird continues to advertise her dogs online. The SSPCA couldn't prove that Finn's farm was the source of the infection found in the sick dogs. Armagh Council say it's likely Finn will get a new licence with some conditions attached. And dog smuggler Brian O'Neill, whether he continues to be a regular ferry passenger across the Irish Sea, remains to be seen.